Hey, y'all. Good morning or afternoon where you happen to be. My name is Damon Brown. You're watching the Bring Your Worth show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Let me connect with you guys on Amazon as well. Cool. All right. Welcome, Amazon folks. Welcome, y'all, in YouTube land over at the official Bring Your Worth stream over at youtube.com/Brown Damon. Welcome to y'all over at LinkedIn. Welcome to y'all checking me out on Twitter or whatever platform you happen to be in. So happy to reconnect. I've been out of the loop because I went camping with my kids and all kinds of stuff going on the regular Wednesday show, but I'm happy to be back with y'all. Again, this is the Bring Your Worth show. I'm coming to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. If you're liking what you're hearing or direction that we're going, be sure to subscribe. It's for free at youtube.com/Brown Damon. Just click the link below. And my main thing is helping you as a side hustler, as a solopreneur, or as an underrepresented or a non-traditional entrepreneur. That means that you have a day job and you're creating stuff on the side. Um, that means that you're like me, where you're building up these startups and trying to create great things, but you got little ones at home and you're trying to balance those things, being the primary caregiver of your little ones or perhaps of your older or dependent people that you're looking out for. I'm helping you get to the next level when those resources, for a lot of us, are not traditionally there. I've been fortunate to be a multi-time TED speaker. I go to the main conference every year up in Vancouver. Shout out to them. I've been a startup founder twice. The second one, called Cuddler, got really popular and it being the number one app in America and in fact in the world. And we ended up selling it. At the same time, I was the primary caregiver of, at the time, my 1 to 2 year old. We actually sold the business right around the time my first son was turning 2. Now I got 2 of them. They're 9 and 6. So I understand that journey. I love it. I respect it. I'm trying to pass on some of that game to you. So thank you for having me as be part of your journey. I come to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Just had a 250th episode about 2-3 weeks ago. So we're turning around 300, and it'll be the 2-year anniversary of this show, December 22nd. So on whatever day the equinox falls on, the beginning of winter, it'll be 2 years. So it's 2 years around the corner. As my mentor Seth Godin says, drip by drip, you try to influence the culture, and then before you know it, things are shifting. So thanks for all the love and support. My latest book is called Career Remix. Get the gig you want based on the skills you've got. Thanks for all the love. I have some previous episodes, if you end up going again to youtube.com/Brown Damon, where I talk about the journey to get this book out. It was a tough journey just because I have my own publishing imprint, which some of the books you see behind me are part of that. And that was a fascinating process. And I did several years of traditional book publishing. So the folks in New York, the folks in San Francisco, the folks in LA, a lot of traditional book deals. And then I left the traditional book business after having a couple bestsellers under my belt with that, started my own thing, had some other bestsellers, but they were my own brand. And then I ended up working with a publisher that I used to work with, Barnes& Noble. You might have heard of them, right? And we ended up collaborating on Career Remix because it's something that the people needed. And it was such a risk and such a different thing for me because I already had my own thing, right? So it's kind of like working with an executive producer when you're already executive producer, and it being a really cool experience. This book is out now. I talk about all the insight with experience, things I learned about myself, and some of the challenges. One of the coolest things is the audiobook of this. I did it in a studio downtown here in Las Vegas, and it was fascinating. I felt like I was Puffy or Jay-Z in the booth, and it was a different experience than my previous audiobooks where I was actually doing stuff in the closet to the left of me. And so all the audiobooks I think are great. I think the quality is there, but Career Remix is a different kind of audiobook. So if you end up grabbing a book, be sure and check out the audiobook. I think you get a lot out of it. But that's enough about me. We have some interesting things we're going to talk about today. One of the things is the amount of shorts that are coming up with the Bring Your Worth channel. If you've been a fan for a little while, or if you've been following it, the shorts are basically like TikTok. So if you're familiar with TikTok, where they're 60 seconds or less, and they encapsulate ideally all the good stuff that you're talking about. It's a new thing over at YouTube. They've only been doing it for probably about a year and a half, and y'all are really liking the shorts. And it's so many people that are coming in and learning more about the channel from the shorts. I'm taking these 5, 10, 20-minute, in some cases 30 or 40-minute episodes that I have with the Bring Your Worth show, again, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then putting them into 60-second or some cases 30-second snippets. Be sure and check it out. I think you'd enjoy it. I was mistaken before. I thought that the main way or the best way to watch it is actually on your phone, which works well, but you can actually just watch it if you go to youtube.com/BrownDamon. And I don't even think I was wrong. I think they changed the interface where if you go into YouTube, you can watch the shorts on there. I think I'm closing in on about 100 shorts. So there's a lot of content on there. It's quick pace. It's bite size. If your schedule's like me, where you don't necessarily have the time to sit down and watch, a 15, 20-minute episode, that is your thing. Be sure and check it out. You can also subscribe through there too if you want more content like that. And then YouTube will actually recommend other channels other than the Bring Your Worth show that have content similar to mine. And you know who you are, so I appreciate your content as well. And if you want to connect more with me, I'm doing something really, really different. I end up collaborating, if I get my word out. I'm actually a decent collaborator, even though I can't say it. Collaborating with the UPS store, which if you're a small business owner like myself, you're always shipping stuff, you're always sending stuff, you're always receiving stuff, you got PO Box, blah, blah, blah. Those are the folks, you probably got one near you that represent that. I ended up collaborating with them and a couple other partners, and I did a series of videos about what the metaverse is. And the metaverse is kind of like that next stage, or metaverses, I should say, but I'll get into that in the videos. But it's the next level of what we're doing right now, which is connecting via technology. This is the next level of that. Just like around the time I was in grad school, then the new thing was people talking about Facebook and people talking about what was going to be after MySpace. This has the same energy. And I was, again, that was 20 years ago. I could feel it. It's like this is the next direction that we're going in. Over in Decentraland, which is one of the metaverse areas, you can actually go to the UPS store and watch my latest videos. It is different. And I was so hyped when I ended up partnering with them and hearing about the opportunity. It was a lot of fun to do. It was great. It was a really good experience, as you can tell by the glowing on my face. Each of the videos is about 90 seconds long and kind of like a short. And it just gets right to the point as far as what's going on in that particular topic in regards to the metaverse, particularly with Decentraland. You can click on there. There's an article in Fast Company about it. Shout out to Fast Company and the people I know over there. And then that will give you guidance as far as how to get on there. But it's in a little virtual world, and it's very similar to what you're experiencing right now, except it's in the world, which is great. As you know, I'm all about impact, moving the culture, trying to connect as many people as possible, particularly connecting with, again, these non-traditional as well as underrepresented entrepreneurs, probably like yourself, giving y'all the toolbox that I have, and maybe giving you other toolboxes, such as the books that we're going to highlight today, and helping y'all get to the next level. Speaking of today, hope to see you in the metaverse too. Speaking of that, so give a shout if you end up coming through. All right, so today we're talking about, excuse me, if I can talk today, the best emotional intelligence EQ books out now. Question I get a lot, which is why some recent videos have addressed this. It's like, Damon, what the hell is emotional intelligence? Now, it's been so much of a buzzword, like we need to have more of it. It impacts us more than IQ or their intellectual quotient or our intellect. It keeps us sharp. It allows us to negotiate better. It makes us better partners, whether it's a romantic partner or a business partner. It makes us better parents. It makes us better leaders, blah, blah, blah. You've been hearing all this probably in Fast Company or in my column in Inc. magazine that I've had for several years. But what exactly is it? So I'm going to recommend some books that will help get you up to speed. And I'm also going to recommend some videos as well as give some definitions to help you get to the next level. If you've coached with me, I'm a business coach as well. You can check me out at damonbrown.net, or you'll learn more about that through the YouTube channel. If you've coached with me or familiar with my work, you know that emotional intelligence is a pillar in that. I feel like that without emotional intelligence, you're capping yourself. Not in the meta version of cap, as the kids say today, like not exaggerating yourself, but like a limitation, a ceiling. Without the emotional intelligence, you're not going to get there. You can get intellect a lot. You can read a bunch of books, ironically enough, to sharpen your intellect. But if you don't know how to interact with other people and deal with your own emotions, you're not going to make it, particularly in this world. I can't speak for your generation. I know for mine, I'm in that transitional generation where when businesses first started and I first got into the world, again, around the time of grad school, then it was still a little bit of an old boys network, as my forefathers and mothers would say. Then it started shifting to I actually expect more from the people that I work with. I'm not going to take a job just because they pay me a bunch of money. I'm also going to want that job to reflect who I am, the values that I care about, and that I'm doing better for the world. That requires a level of emotional intelligence because you have to know what your value is. So, enough beating around the bush. What exactly is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is recognizing, understanding, and managing our emotions while simultaneously recognizing, understanding, and influencing the emotions of others. So recognizing, understanding, and managing our own emotions while recognizing, understanding, and influencing the emotions of others. Now, my interpretation of influencing isn't that you try to make people feel a certain way, but it's more like you understand where they're coming from. Well, we can break it down. You recognize where they're coming from. You understand as much as possible where they're coming from. And then you're able to explain to them what your point of view is. And perhaps influence becomes having a positive outcome. And it could be me talking with my kids, which my two kids were fighting this morning. So I had to use some type of emotional intelligence with them because I felt like saying, y'all need to be quiet. But that wasn't quite enough because they were having some issues and I had to help them sort it out. That required a level of emotional intelligence, even though it was super early in the morning and I didn't feel like dealing with that. Same thing with a business partner or romantic partner. There's a level that you have to not necessarily stay cool, but be at least semi-objective about how you feel, to be articulate enough, which means being calm enough to say what the heck you're feeling, and then to be receptive to whatever the other people in your world, the situation, the organization, the kids, what they're saying, and respect their POV. That's hard. Again, I just went through that this morning, like a few hours ago. It's early over here on the West Coast. So I just went through that this morning. And that's the process. That's what you sign up for. But if you want to be a good parent, if you want to be a good leader, if you want to be a good partner, then you need to work on this. And so it's key to understand what it means. And then next to understand how you can elevate yours. And as I talk about in some of the videos I'm going to recommend, it's a lifelong process. As I say in one of the videos, I teach this. I help my coaching clients get there. And so I struggle with it, as my wife can attest. One good place to start, if you want to learn more about emotional intelligence, is to check out my playlist. I've been talking about emotional intelligence on the show for literally 2 years. We're approaching 2 years in like a few weeks, as I just said. There's a whole playlist dedicated to emotional intelligence. We have Brene Brown, who, as many of y'all know, is really into emotional intelligence, particularly the darker emotions that we don't want to deal with. She's created tools to help us deal with that. I talk about her on there. I talk about Oprah. I talk about Adam Grant. Shout out to Adam with his wonderful books. I talk about a lot of folks who are creating content, who are discussing emotional intelligence in a way that works for us. And this playlist includes most of the videos I talk about, that I'm going to talk about for the rest of the show. It also includes some interesting content that I think you're not going to find many other places. Again, I go to TED every year. I've had my own best-selling books. Luckily, I've been fortunate enough to be in the room with some of these people and talk with a lot of the people, including Brene Brown, in person and or online, directly one-on-one. So I'm trying to take that insight and share it with y'all from the interviews with Inc. Magazine, from the books, etc., from being in the room at TED. Hopefully that'll help you get to the next level. This will be a really good place to start. So if books are too much for you, which is okay, no judgment from me. Sometimes books are too much for me too. Check out the playlist. That'll give you quick insight. The average video on there is like 5, maybe 10 minutes. So if you got 5 or 10 minutes and you're hanging out with me, you can hang out with the videos. I want to say there's about a dozen videos on the playlist, maybe a little bit more. And a lot of them, again, are these recent videos that I talk about here. So I have a new video coming out on Friday that's going to be talking about EQ, and it's Become Self-Aware, How to Know Your Achilles Heel, Use this simple exercise. And it's about something called the Johari window. Now, the Johari window is this really simple psychological tool that will allow you to understand yourself better. If you understand yourself better and how you show up to other people, as they say in the different worlds, in the different psychological and sociological worlds, then you're able to better regulate and understand your own emotions and your own strengths with that. Like, that's such an important thing to understand. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and actually use a different type of tech tool. So hopefully this will work. So stay with me. So the first book that I'm going to recommend is Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Let's see if we can get it going. Is it working? No, unfortunately, the app that I was going to use isn't going to work, but it might work for the next ones. Daniel Goleman is, as we say, the OG, the original gangster of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence began to be discussed back in the 50s. I want to say 1955. You can correct me in the comments. Around 1955, so well before I was around. And it was researchers realizing that your emotional quotient was actually there. And I would argue that before that, people didn't really know, where they're like, all right, well, I think emotions are important, but it's like, maybe emotions are important. But if you're really smart, then you should be able to go into any room. And, I spent time in Silicon Valley. I minored in engineering. We called it computing at Oakland University. Shout out to the Grizzlies that I went to for undergrad. So I understand the engineering world and the technology world. And when I was younger, I learned several different programming languages. For some folks, that's enough to say, okay, you're a genius, you're smart, come through. And particularly with Silicon Valley, remember, I was there probably 2008 to 2011. So I was there during the heyday of that, where it's like, yes, you're smart. Here's $250,000. Let's create the next Facebook. Or create Facebook, actually, if you think about that time period. And that was the 1950s. And then suddenly you had, wait a second, your emotions and how you deal with them matter. And you can be a genius, but if you have a temper tantrum, every time someone tells you that you're incorrect in your answer, you throw a telephone across the floor. I'm not making up stuff. These are real stories. Either I've experienced, I got some stories. Either experience things I've experienced or that other people that I've mentored or who have mentored me have told me about. Geniuses that cannot get their stuff together. That discussion wasn't really happening in the 50s. It was just like, oh, you're smart, you're aggressive, because, it was like the Mad Men period. You're aggressive, come on through. This shifted that. It was the beginning of a shift. Maybe people weren't ready to hear that, but it came out. Goleman, which I want to say mid-90s. Again, you can correct me in the comments. Excuse me. But his book brought it to the masses and said emotional intelligence is actually quantifiable. It is quantifiable. Here's emotional intelligence, is what it means. So it took 3-4 decades, something like that. So it came out in the 80s. I'm guessing, again, mid-90s. Blew the hinges off of everything. And my mentors, you know who you are. Thank you for watching and listening and supporting me over the years. Like, I was schooled on this book and learned about this book when I was, before grad school. We'll leave it at that. So learning about this is really important. This is the first book that actually tackled it. It's been a bestseller for a gazillion years for a reason. There's a 2.0 version of it, which I think is by his son. I might be able to please correct me in the comments again. Excuse me if I'm wrong with that, but there's a 2.0 version. This is the OG version. Highly recommend it. Even if you just skim it or look at the beginning or, get the highlights of it, you want it on your shelf if you want to understand EQ. I actually have a video that I did recently about how is EQ different than IQ. Similar to the definition I just gave, except it's much deeper. This will be, again, a good place to start. If you end up going back to the Better Emotional Intelligence playlist, this is the beginning of the playlist. So if you want to mess with the YouTube channel and you want to learn more about this, just click on the link there. It's right here. It'll be below if you're watching this on any of the major channels. Click on that, and then it begins with how is EQ different than IQ, and I break it down. And yeah, hopefully that'll help you get to the next level. But be sure and check out Daniel Goleman's book. You probably get it, grab it, use. Heck, maybe one of your mentors, somebody that's an OG to you, already has it on their shelf. Like, it's that kind of book. It's a cornerstone, as we say. The next book I would recommend. I tried it. Oh, it's not working. I had all kinds of fancy stuff planned for y'all today, but it's not working. It's okay. Technology wants me to keep it simple. We actually have Rising Strong by Brene Brown. I have a ton of Brene Brown related content on my website. It's some of my most popular videos, so I know y'all love discussing her and her work. Quick summary: Brene Brown talks about guilt and shame. Doesn't sound like fun, but they're the cornerstone of EQ. Because if you feel guilty about something, which means like you feel like you should be doing something but you're not, that might come across in how you show up to other people. If you feel shame, which shame is that you feel like you're being judged. Not that you are being judged, but you feel like you're being judged based on what you're doing or not doing, then that's absolutely going to come across in how you interact with other people. I remember I had an interaction with someone over the last couple of weeks, and it was, I wouldn't say it was negative, but they were throwing a lot of stuff at me. And it took a little while for me to be patient and to cut through that. And come to find out there was this bundle, almost like this. You think of nerves. Nerves are just bundles, right? Nerves are just bundles. But imagine those bundles all tied up. And nerves are sensitive. And it might come off as anger. It might come off as condescension. It might come off as arrogance. And then as we talked more, then it started to unbundle and ended up being tied up in all these insecurities based on whatever they felt as though they should have been doing or they weren't doing, whatever. That was, as my mentors say, that was their stuff. That wasn't my stuff. And luckily I knew myself well enough, and I love the work that I do as a coach, and we're helping people get through whatever they need to get through, is that I was able to stay steadfast. But that's what I mean by why guilt and shame and those powerful, in some cases, nasty emotions, what we call nasty, it's important for us to recognize what they are. I feel guilt and shame right now based on things that I should be doing or shouldn't be doing. But because I recognize those things, number one, I can be motivated to do something about it, which isn't at the point. But I also can move forward as far as knowing when those emotions come up, when I'm triggered by the actions of others or in certain situations. And sometimes I'll just have to take a breath and be like, wow, I'm ready to like lash out or be angry about this, whatever. But this has nothing to do with them. This has nothing to do with the situation. This is just my stuff. And sometimes it's just your stuff. And that's okay. That's what Brene Brown specializes in. That's why I can summarize it. Again, I have like about 20 videos connected to Brene Brown's work on the YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe, and you can hear all about it. This is my favorite book of hers. I have not read the most recent book, Atlas of the Heart. Like I said, I can relate to y'all who are overwhelmed by books right now. I have so much stuff going on, and there's a lot going on a macro level, as the economists say, especially like the last few days. There's been a lot going on. So I have not been diving into books as much as I usually do. So I've not read Atlas of the Heart. I heard it's amazing, but I've read all her previous books. This is the one for me. This is the one I always come back to. It is about when you fall down emotionally, when you have an awful argument with your partner, when you're disgraced at work, when you make a business decision and you fail. I don't like to use the word fail, but Sometimes we do. Sometimes we can call it a failure. And then in retrospect, we see we survived that failure, and then we're back up. To use Brene Brown's words, what happens between us falling on our ass and us showing up in the arena again? That doesn't mean becoming a success. That means getting back in the game. What happens between those two things? I've had, I'd say in the last 5 years. Yeah, I think it ends up being about one, maybe equivalent of one, maybe two rising strong moments per year over the past 5 years. So in the past 5 years or so, which has been a turbulent, exciting, intense 5 years for me, career-wise and otherwise. Yeah. And it's like, so how did I get back up? What is the process? Is there not a system, but what goes through someone's mind, someone's heart as they rise strong again? What happens? The main quote is from Teddy Roosevelt. It's like, forgive me, because he's a man of his time, so only says man, but it's not the people in the cheap seats, but it's the man in the arena. When you get your ass kicked, your ass handed to you, whatever term you want to use, and then you need to get back in the arena. This is the blueprint for that. And as you can tell, this speaks very, very much to my heart. In fact, it made me a big Brene Brown fan. I saw her speak at TED, which was a privilege in itself, because not everybody knew her like that. It was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago now. Nobody knew her like that. And I was like, who the hell is this? And then about a year later, she blew up. So I was privileged to be there. But this book made me a fan. So I highly recommend this book if you're looking into emotional intelligence at all. This video is my most popular video on the BringYourWorth channel. I got about 270 videos. This is the most popular one, next to the TED Talk that I did now about 10 years ago. I did the TED Talk. And y'all like sharing that, which I appreciate. As far as episodic content, this is by far my most popular episode. How can I accept others for who they are? It's 7 minutes long. It's straight from Brene Brown. And I'm talking about my favorite passage from, I believe, Rising Strong. And it comes down to that. Emotional intelligence is this. How can I accept others for who they are? And I would add a little addendum to there. How can I accept myself for who I am? I can have some jacked up emotions, and I can have a temper, and I could be absolutely unreasonable. Even though I seem like a reasonable person, I can be absolutely unreasonable. As I get older, as I get more mature, I'm accepting that part of myself more. The less I accept that part of myself, the more I'm not in control of that part of myself. This talks about that. Please watch it. If there's anything that you watch in all this, please watch it. It's also, again, part of the emotional intelligence playlist. I think it's episode number 3 or 4 on the playlist. I'll throw it back up there for y'all. There it is. The emotional intelligence playlist. All the stuff I'm talking about is on there. Be sure and check it out. And you just press play and hopefully get some game. But favorite book of hers by one of my favorite authors. And you're telling me this is your favorite episode of the show over the past 2 years. Be sure and check out both. The next one is, I'm going to try the fancy thing one more time. Hey, it worked. There we go. Yay to me. So, EQ applied. Thank you, Justin, by Justin Bariso. Justin and I have been colleagues over at Inc. I think he's had a column longer than I have. I've had my column for like 6 years. I think he's had his column for like 10, some insane amount. And he's doing this thing. He came out with a book a few years ago called EQ Applied. The reason why I like this book, and I have the physical version. I'm so used to having digital. I have the physical version. Again, shout out to Justin. Got it a little while ago. As you can tell, there's some bends going on, which is always a good sign as far as my reading material. But thin book, relatively thin. I recommend this book because it's an excellent starter kit Like you have Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and that's talking about it from, I believe he's a researcher, from a researcher standpoint. And then you have Rising Strong, which I have like 3 copies of it, but of course, I don't have any here. I don't think I've ever had a physical copy. But with Brene Brown's book, she's also a researcher. Shout out to the University of Texas at Austin. I believe that's where she's based. She's a researcher. So she's going deep. As you can tell, I can talk about this stuff all day. I like going deep with stuff. That's one of the reasons why I'm a business coach and love coaching y'all. Justin's is like a primer. And that's one of the reasons why I like it so much, where it's just, you don't know anything about emotional intelligence. Like you don't know how to spell EQ. Here you go. You got it. You got your basics covered. And I think there's something beautiful and there's a place for that. A handful of years ago, I did a book called The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, which this is the updated version, the deluxe version with all the books in the trilogy as you can read. But I did a book called The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, and it had and y'all made it a bestseller. And it was similar in that it wasn't talking about these complicated entrepreneurship concepts. It was just me talking about, in 21 very short chapters, talking about what got me from here to there as far as getting a Cuddler acquired while I was a primary caregiver of my then 1 to 2 year old. And taking the insight I got from the folks talking at TED, again, Brene Brown's in there. Awesome authors that I got to know later, like Stephen Pressfield, shout out to Stephen, all these different folks. And that ended up connecting with y'all a lot. Because for a lot of us, we didn't necessarily want to get a book that was like, I'm thinking of like 20 different books, that are really popular right now. You just go to Amazon, you check it out. It's like the most popular business books on entrepreneurship, and you'll see them on there. A lot of folks that were in the same circles as me, or I was in their same circles. I was in Silicon Valley 15 years ago when they were kind of cutting their teeth. But you don't necessarily always want the deep dive. You want something where it's like, all right, I'm a new entrepreneur. What the heck am I going to do? This is the same energy. It's like, all right, I don't know what EQ means, right? Exactly. From heady to practical. Thank you. You're articulating it better than I can, And so it's like, I don't know anything about emotional intelligence. So where do I start? This will be a great place to start. Now, if you know a little bit about emotional intelligence, then going straight to Daniel Goleman or even straight to Brene Brown might work for you. If you're like, Damon, there's a lot going on here, EQ Applied is a spot. Shout out to Justin. I wish you all the success with the book. It's been out for a year or two. I think it's doing well. So shout out to you. I hope you're doing well as well. And again, a great aperitif, aperitif, or I don't know, dessert. If you want to eat it before or after, who cares? A great pairing with this would, again, be an emotional intelligence playlist. Be sure and check that out. Another one I would recommend. Sorry, I'm cracking myself up today. Another one I would recommend. Oh, cool. The logos are working. Another one I'd recommend is Sparked by Jonathan Fields. Shout out Jonathan. Hope you're doing wonderful. His book came out probably about a year and a half ago. I think it was early last year. His book is fascinating, where it reminds me a lot of my book, Build From Now, where he has his own tool to help you understand how you appear in the world and how you function in your inner world as well. At least it's the way I interpret it. Jonathan Fields is a longtime business coach. He's had a podcast called The Good Life Podcast for, wow, I remember hearing about him before podcasts were even popular. He's been doing that. He's a former lawyer. He's a former yoga instructor, like just like a fascinating life. And when I got a chance to talk with him, and I'll be sure and put up the interview in a second, when I had a chance to talk with him, after listening to and watching his stuff for all the years, you can see the blend of all the different disciplines. And I think that's so important to understand and recognize. Before I get into Spark, it's also important to understand Jonathan, where one of the things I talk about with my coaching clients, a lot of y'all that come to me that are trying to figure things out, it's because you're making a pivot from one profession to another, or you're trying to take your career to the next level. You're in a transition. That's what I'm trying to say. You want more, or you want different. And the first thing that I always try to share, whether it's the tools that I give or the conversations that we have, is that there's never a wasted moment. So my time that I spent working as an astrologist, and that's how I made a living for a short period of time, because I was writing horoscopes for some of the major websites that you probably heard of. When I was beginning as a freelance journalist, that was the main way that I made a living, and that's how I was able to pay my rent over in Chicago. Understanding psychology, understanding the motions of things, understanding that everything has a season. A lot of that energy is similar to astrology or to writing horoscopes. So there's a period of time that this fits, and you're not going to go in this direction when the wind is going that way. It's helped me be a better parent. It's helped me be a better partner. It's helped me be a better, hopefully, coach. So I'm helping y'all understand the seasons of your life. And you don't go left when the wind is going right. Instead, you find a gentle way to build things to where you do need to go. As my book before last talks about how you build from now. I love Jonathan's work because he's pulling on all those different things. Nothing is wasted. You can tell it in his writing, you can tell it in his conversations. With the interview, the 2-part interview I had with him, again, I'll give a link in a second. You can see the thoughtfulness in that. But that comes from those X amount of years of experience as a yoga instructor and as a leader, as a lawyer, etc. All that stuff comes together into this one person. Sparked is a reflection of that, where it ends up being that all the parts that you have, all your experience, even the shitty ones, actually add up to be you. And some of that wisdom that you take for granted right now, you wouldn't have got it without going through some of that mud or some of the other challenges. His tool, I think you can call it an assessment tool, breaks people down into 2 different types of energies. And I call them energies, but type kind of archetypes might be better. I use the word energy a lot, but archetypes. And based on those archetypes, then you see how you show up in the world. And again, in my words, how your inner world shows up as well. So how you show up in the world and how you feel about yourself and how you process things inside. Fascinating book, really cool. I got my 2 archetypes. They were on the money. It was a little bit scary. And the quiz itself, I think it's free. It was free when the book launched a year and a half ago or so. I think it's still free. The link is going to be in the next thing I'm going to show you. And I think the quiz took me like 15 minutes, so it's worth your time. To learn more about Jonathan, be sure and check out part 1 of our 2-part interview. Both parts are in there, but there's just a link to, I believe, the first part of the interview. Satisfaction Spectrum, Jonathan Fields' Sparketype. So he talks about something called the Satisfaction Spectrum, which has to do with as a business coach, I love this part. And you can see us getting into it in a good way as far as talking about the Satisfaction Spectrum, as far as it says, the satisfaction you get from the work that you do. That doesn't mean money. That doesn't mean like clout, as folks say nowadays, or getting your ego stroked and being proud. It has to do with satisfaction of the work that you do, not based on recognition or money or resources. It's like, no, this is my jam, right? This is what I do. Back to that old adage, I would do this for free. You're not going to do it for free. I can't say that as a coach. Don't do it for free. But you would do it for free. And we talk about the spectrum. And it's about a 10-minute conversation as part of it, maybe 15. Definitely check it out if you want to learn more about Jonathan. And please check out his book. It's a fascinating book. Excuse me. The last book I would recommend, one of my favorites, is Thich Hanh's No Mud, No Lotus. If you've been a regular watcher of the show, you know I'm a big fan of this book. Tiniest book in the world, reminds me of some of my earlier books. And it is a banger. I was going to say every other page. No, every page is like fire. Fantastic book. The concept behind the book, really simple. According to him, as well as other folks that are familiar with the lotus plants, which are those beautiful plants, we talk about the lotus position in yoga, or I'm more familiar with Buddhism. In Buddhism, where you're sitting with your legs crossed and your hands open, that's the lotus. The lotus plant looks like that, where you've seen pictures of it online probably, where it's greenish tint and it's flowing out. But if you look carefully at the pictures of it, unless it's heavily photoshopped, it's sitting like in mud or some mucky water. That's where the lotus plant grows, or lotus flower grows. No mud, which means the nasty stuff. No lotus, which means the stuff that we like, the beauty. Without the rough stuff, there is no beauty. It's the yin and the yang, right? Negative, positive, all those things are connected. Nhat Hanh is actually one of the people that schooled Martin Luther King Jr. MLK Jr. came to him while he was working on the civil rights movement and the things that were going on in Selma and so forth. That whole era in the 50s and 60s, he went over there, connected with Nhat Hanh, who originally from Tibet, became a refugee, same period of time as the Dalai Lama. I think he might actually have been older than the Dalai Lama. Same era where, he ended up being exiled. And he gave him game, as we say. And Martin Luther King Jr. came back here and started the peaceful protests. So he's the OG, my favorite word today. He's the OG of some of those things that really influenced directly, as an African American, directly influenced my life. So it's humbling to see his work directly, which is fantastic. He talks about all those beautiful experiences and all those rough experiences, even talking about when the exile was happening. And actually, I'm sorry, when similar exile was happening in Vietnam during the Vietnam War back in the 70s, pretty much before my time. And there's this wonderful passage about them accepting that the war could continue and also accepting that the war would eventually end. And him sharing with folks as far as not creating false hope. I think it might have been 1968 or 69 when he was talking to folks. So think about the Vietnam War continued for a handful of years later. So I think that's where the EQ and emotional intelligence really starts to come in, because it's you being realistic about your expectations. You're not creating false hope based on these emotional needs that you have. But you can't you can't bypass those false hopes. You can't have a clear view as far as your future, or even a clear view of your present. Let's keep it real. You can't even be aware fully of where you are in your life right now, the circumstances, what people are doing, the situations, if you don't have a clear view of your inner world and your emotional inner workings. You can't do that. That passage about Vietnam and other passages speak so clearly to me as far as the importance of knowing where you are emotionally. If you don't know where you are emotionally, then you're not going to make it. Thank you. Because if you don't know where you're emotionally, then you're not going to make it. Because as you go through challenges, and I talk about this in the emotional intelligence playlist and a lot of those videos, the thing is that even if you're able to find a semblance of balance among that emotional chaos that you might be feeling, life isn't static and it's not in a vacuum. And so then there's going to be new challenges that are going to come up. There's going to be things which I almost feel like the universe does this on purpose. There are going to be things that touch those sensitive points that you're not dealing with. There's going to be new situations that you're going to be in. There's going to be new situations that the people that you love are going to be in. There's new situations that your career is going to be in, and the people that you work for or work with, people that are working for you, the whole nine. In other words, things are going to continually evolve. So the stuff that you're not dealing with, as far as emotional intelligence, the EQ the stuff you don't want to touch because it's too touchy feeling and you don't want to deal with it, it always rises up. I've been around just long enough. I'm not old, but I've been around just long enough to see things come back around. And whether it's my coaching clients, whether it's myself, I'm not pointing fingers, my own stuff, whether it's stuff with my partner, stuff with my kids, stuff with people that I love, stuff with people that I'm just seeing from a distance. those emotions don't go away. And so the higher you can get your emotional intelligence up, the more you can be ready to deal with those emotions, past, present, and future. So it's not just a matter of, I want to be psychologically more healthy. It's also, you're doing this for your career, which is one of the reasons why I'm emphasizing emotional intelligence so much. In the research that was done back in the 50s, one of the things that didn't seem to be discussed as much is it seemed to emphasize more how emotional intelligence can help you connect with other people and get up higher in your particular career and in the world. What's being discussed now more, and what I want to share with you, is that emotional intelligence is also part of our health. And if there's a big ambition you have, and there's a big, fat, hairy idea that you want to execute, your equivalent of a moonshot, as we used to say back in the day, and your emotions are all jacked up, they will come out on your way up. And so you can either deal with them now and get into that healthy process, or unfortunately deal with them later. And by then, frankly, it could be too late. I think it's that important. Thich Nhat book is fantastic. It's a tiny book. The stuff I just said, he says it, but way more eloquently. And he was literally in the arena, had been on battlefields and all that stuff as a Buddhist monk. And he just passed away, I want to say in April. And when he passed away, I ended up doing a show dedicated to him. I highlight my favorite quote from him. And I say that on purpose. Thich Nhat best quote for right now. He did this book, I don't know, 20 years ago, maybe. I just learned about it a few years ago, so I was late to the party. This book came out a decade or two ago, at least. It's relevant right now. He didn't know the pandemic was happening until obviously much later in his life. He didn't know we'd have all the political unrest, particularly here in America. He didn't know we'd be dealing with potential war, actually going through war. Shout out to Ukraine, going through war right now. He didn't know all this macro stuff, as they say, will be happening. But the quote that he had fits right now. If you want to do the work that fits right now, if you want to create things that stand the test of time, to bring it full circle, you got to work on the EQ. Because if you're all tied up, again, like I talked about, those nerves are all tied up, you can't see straight, how are you going to impact the world? You got your own garbage to deal with, right? Again, I am not clean. I got my own issues. Again, as my partner and my loved ones can attest to. And at the same time, I know I'm doing my very best to raise my EQ to the point where I can serve you, the very best way that I can. And yes, the Stockdale paradox, be able to look under the rock. If you're not looking under the rock, that doesn't make it disappear. It just doesn't. So from the top, recommended books. Let's see if I can read my own handwriting here. All right. Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, the OG of this fascinating book, and just have it on your shelf and pull on it as you need it. Rising Strong, my favorite book from, I would say, my favorite author right now. And she gets deep. So if you're ready to go deep, it's a good place to start. Very approachable writing, but she's kind of like me. She just kind of gets to the point. If you're ready to have that deep conversation, Brene Brown's that person. EQ Applied by Justin Bariso. Shout out to Justin. A really good starter kit, as we used to say back in the day, as far as if you want to learn more about EQ. Sparked by Jonathan Fields. Well, I got all these books up here. I'm not even showing them. Sorry, Justin. EQ Applied, as well as Sparked by Jonathan Fields. A good way to understand your inner workings. And he has a great quiz on there that I think is really good. And lastly, No Mud, No Lotus by Thich Nhat Hanh. The late Thich Nhat Hanh, rest in peace wherever you are. He passed away in April. Buddhist monk, Fantastic book. It doesn't leave my shelf like it's here. This is actually my partner's copy, my wife's copy. She hasn't even got it back yet. I've held on this for like 5 years. Sorry, but it's fantastic. I need to get my own copy. I think I actually do have another copy around, but I don't know where it is. Hers is more accessible. It's right here. Don't leave home without it. Fantastic book. Again, to go back to the top, if you missed the top, my new book is Career Remix, Get the Gig You Want, based on skills you've got. As I talked about at the beginning of the show, the audiobook is different. So check out the audiobook if you have not already. I think you'd appreciate it, particularly if you're a fan of the show. Imagine the show, but I'm specifically talking about your career. And I think the audiobook is maybe 5 hours, something like that. So imagine a deep dive. Speaking of deep dives with Dr. Brown, Dr. Brene Brown. My shorts, be sure and check those out because they're a really quick hit, 30 seconds or so each. I think you'll get a lot out of it. I think you enjoy it. And you can see me over in Decentraland, one of the metaverses. Your boy's in the metaverse now, working with the UPS store. And I have a series of videos where I'm talking about the metaverse and how you can take advantage of it as a small or medium-sized business owner, as well as an entrepreneur. And lastly, be sure and check out the best emotion. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm tripping today. The Better Emotional Intelligence playlist. All the stuff I'm talking about today, all those videos are on there. I think you get a lot out of it. I think you'd enjoy it. Anyway, until next time, much love. Remember that you can always bring your worth, and you can always build from now. Take care of yourselves.